internets? Welcome back to another episode of Sultans and Sneakers. I'm your host, as always, Maheen the podcaster, and I'm here with Yusuf Clack. Yusuf, I've known about you for several years because of Clackfit and what you do for fitness and coaching. But yeah, I think we were on a WhatsApp group a couple years ago. But first of all, hey man, thanks for coming on the show. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Hey, my pleasure.
Eh,
Sultans of sneakers. What's up?
yeah, man. So I hope you don't mind me eating. I'm eating my dinner right now. So what I've got is I don't know if you can see this. It's a spin-off of a Crunch Wrap Supreme. Let me see if I can show it to you. Right?
I'm gonna go to the big. I'm gonna go to the big screen. There we go.
Yeah. It's a
Okay.
Crunch Wrap Supreme, but it's like a healthy.
Yeah.
Taco Bell's got that Crunch Wrap Supreme. So I've been following this. I hired a personal trainer about beginning of the year, literally, right?
Yeah.
And so he's got me on this nutrition plan, fit gym plan, all that stuff, and this has been one of my go-tos. It's just like a recipe I found online, and it's been hitting the spot for me. So
Nice.
yeah, hopefully the listeners will hear some crunching as I'm eating this, because I've got this rule too where I want to try to avoid eating like within a 2 hour window before I go to sleep. So even though I'm probably gonna go to bed late again, but yeah, man, I want to first of all, like, people following you on Instagram on Clackfit, and what I'm noticing is that you've been like kind of selling your stuff off. So you used to have a gym, and now you're kind of closing that out. You've closed it down with Corona and everything.
Yep. Actually, I kind of continued on. I was like, whatever. I don't. I trusted our people. I trusted myself to be responsible.
Mm-hmm.
But I just found that most customers, there's almost like this PTSD effect, from all the information out there. So people thought that maybe just by opening a door handle to our gym that was touched by others, they might be risking their parents' lives and stuff like that. So I just saw that, even though I was down to kind of show up and train people and just be
Mm-hmm.
cautious, we have an open air gym. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a cardio. It's kind of unique. So basically, I mean, when March came, we were all real nervous, right? I was actually real nervous because you hear these stories of like crematories in China and stuff like that. I was like, man, this thing is, and then there were some estimates that came out of 2 million people going to be dead by the end of 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people that made those estimates, they haven't been fired, they haven't been shamed, they still have public, and the thing is, the public is still imprinted with those numbers. And so at a certain point, after about April, I had really been reading up on it because I thought at that time I was going to stay in fitness, and I felt, okay, whatever public health does, that's one thing, but I want to make sure I feel ethically, that I feel that I'm not putting my customers or their families at risk. So I wanted to just kind of have my own point of view on it, whether that was going to end up being more cautious than public health officials, or less cautious or more nuanced. And I think that's where I felt a little more nuance. Just believing early on it was breath based. I mean, we didn't have any examples of touch transferring the COVID. It was theorized, that it could possibly get from touch to, droplets in the air and so forth. But all the outbreaks that were traced, they were always, droplet breath based. So with us, we're not a cardio center. We always had small groups. It's a big facility, like 2,700 square feet. So, if we're training 3, 4, 5, even 6 people, and we have lots of machines, it would be very easy to have people spread out. We have ceiling fans. We had 2 roll-up doors on each side, so we could have really nice airflow. There was just no way for particles to be concentrated. And of course, we would not allow anyone symptomatic. If I was somehow symptomatic, I wouldn't come in. So anyways, that was my intention, to just keep training. And generously, some customers actually kept their subscription on for a little bit. But I just kind of I was just trying to look forward, because I had to make, my kids are in high school, and I had, got into fitness more of a passion move, not a pure business play. I mean, I was hoping to make tons of money in it, but I always kind of led with my heart. I didn't treat it like a really cold, calculated business. So I never really cashed in the way maybe I had hoped or dreamed. I was really just kind of living month to month. And so I had to look forward, and I just saw that the kind of demeanor, even the customers that were coming, they were super hesitant. And I thought, personal training is a very personal business, right? So there's a lot of it is just connecting with people face to face, without a mask, and that's kind of what, you're selling fitness, but I think people stay and they come back for a lot more complicated needs that they might not be in touch with. So that was a long answer. Yeah.
Sometimes they might just want a friend or something, right? Someone to talk to. Is that what you're trying to get at?
I think so. And somebody to listen to for their health stuff. So it's like a lightweight counseling in a way where it's like, hey, we're here to take care of your health and fitness. But, you know, I've always looked at health as an integrated thing. So it's like we're addressing the body, but we can't really, you know, and so, you know, not going outside of my scope of expertise. But I think, yeah, people appreciated having that personal attention, someone looking after them, taking concern for their well-being. And you can't help but have, you know, a certain connection. In there. And so I just realized that the landscape was going to be much different. If we're going to continue on, it wasn't going to be the type of fitness that I had been accustomed to selling. You know, and so I was like, you know what? I just don't know if I'm interested in this new style of fitness that California is going to probably adopt for the next couple of years. And so we just, yeah, we made the decision to get out of the business. And that was not easy, but at the same time, the more I dragged out and the more I just saw this was going to be painful, I was like, hey, you know what? Time for something new. And so I made that shift.
I got you. How many years did you have your gym?
You know, it's a fun story. We started in the park. I took some probably people on here. I know the Muslims got into internet marketing, right? So some people probably know Evan Pagan and that crowd. I went with actually some other Muslim bros to the first seminar. They took me along. I think it was a recommendation of Muhammad al-Sharif, maybe, or somebody within that crew. And so we went to
the Discover You Life crew, the Discover You Life kind of guys.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so, and even before that, I think it was named something else. So I was in early on with those guys. And I never went to like the seminars and stuff, but I was friends with a lot of the guys doing that. And I was inspired by what they were saying. I was like, wow, this is pretty interesting. And so, I was just, you know, working a regular sales job and then did that. And then I was like, you know what? At the same time, my son was training martial arts at Kung Lee. Kung Lee had a gym, you know, some people might know from mixed martial arts fame. You know, he was a famous MMA guy and now he's, you know, kind of a Hollywood star for fight movies. But he had a gym. My son was doing martial arts there and I hired a personal trainer. Saw a lot of benefits and kind of changed my life. I thought I was old at like 30 and I just thought I was breaking down. And when I saw these older, vital men, I was like, whoa, it kind of changed my paradigm. And I just saw how much life changed when I got in shape. I just couldn't get this idea out of my head that I'm like, you know what? I want to do that same thing for other people. So we took that sales information, wrote a sales letter. And because I didn't really know enough to think I was being dishonest, my sales letters were super salesy. I marketed the heck out of the kettlebell, all the Russian secrets and special forces and all the stuff that, you know, the Russians didn't want people to know. And basically we had this fun sales letter and we sold a boot camp, Ramadan boot camp in June of 2009. And so we started doing these kettlebell boot camps out in the park. Mm-hmm. It was kind of marketed towards men and fathers so we had some non-Muslims in there as well. And then slowly it just started expanding. We'd train at different locations. I started renting martial arts spaces. And then fast forward to 2012, one of our customers who was really an advocate for what we did, he did well financially, said, you know what, let's get a space. We need our own space. And so we invested and we got our facility in 2012.
Okay. So you said at the age of 30 is like, were you into fitness before the age of 30 then?
No, I got a business degree. I mean, I'd say that I was always into athletics and, you know, I kind of a little bit of weightlifting here and there, but not from a professional standpoint until about, 2009. Dude, I can't do math on the fly, but yeah, it's about age 30.
You know what? When I first heard of Clackfit, I was immediately trying to make this connection. Is it like a spin on CrossFit? Like, would you say your workouts are kind of CrossFit style or your training's CrossFit style, or is that a misrepresentation? How would you describe how you train?
No, so interestingly, when we started in the park, CrossFit was just still pretty niche. Like I had heard of it because I was in that thing, but it wasn't, you know, anywhere near the brand that it is today, right? It was still funky. I mean, I'm right near where it started in Santa Cruz, right? So I was living in San Jose at the time. Mm-hmm. So people in our area had started to hear about it. It was, you know, super hardcore. We actually started out, I was trying to like come out with some name that like taking those marketing principles. At first, I was trying to come out with a name that was geared toward men or dads and like maybe had a military vibe, or I was confused with the branding. But ultimately, as we went on, people kept telling me like, I come here for you, you know? And so I was trying to avoid the guru model because I thought, you know what, that's less scalable, right? It's kind of dependent upon me. But at the end of the day, I realized like I couldn't escape that this is a personal business, and people were signing up because they just connected, or they weren't signing up. Like the people that went with our tribe, they were connected to kind of my general approach, and kind of the market that I was going after. Like the people that we attracted, they just felt comfortable. The feedback we got time and time again is like, you know what, I was never able to work out consistently. And you made me do things I never really thought I could do. And I just felt comfortable. Like the guys that you had are super humble and just low key. And it was just a real positive environment. And then when we shifted to a facility, that's when we just went full on co-ed, much bigger rent and, much more responsibilities at that point. So we're just like, okay, let's just make it a bigger, let's not try to have that experiment. I thought there was this big market of dads out there waiting to work out. And then I come to find out that really that's a tough market to go after, because they're so dialed into the provider mindset and so busy that the last thing that they want to do is they'd like to be fit, they like the idea of being fit, but the actual idea of showing up 3-4 times a week and working out for an hour on a schedule, and if they miss that exact time, especially in Silicon Valley, people wanted the flexibility to just oh, we got this project, it was always like, we got this release, we got this deadline, we got this, I'll just start right after that, right? And then there's another release. So
it never ends. It's interesting. You remind I'm thinking about it now. 2008 was like kind of when you started. Like I've always been yo-yo with fitness, I would say, right? I graduated high school in '99, so I don't know where that puts us age wise to each other.
94 for me.
94. Okay.
Yeah.
So 99. I ran track in high school. I wanted to play football, but I'm a small guy. I was in high school. I was like 100. I think I was like 105 pounds. I graduated at 120. So I was
Did
tiny.
you ever try the workouts? Did you do the double days, like try out for it?
No, I mean, I went to the summer conditioning, right?
Yeah.
And then I think so what happened was that, so and our school had a pretty decent program as far as like, they had won a state title the year I was a freshman in Division II. A couple guys went to the NFL actually from my school. But it was a relatively new school. It was founded, like my graduating class was the first 4-year class, right? So the thing of it, yeah. So I remember the head coach who won the state title. He had left to take a bigger job at a powerhouse school down in Cincinnati, which Cincinnati in the state of Ohio, right? Cleveland and Cincinnati are that's where the high school hotbeds are, right? Columbus, for some reason, even that's where Ohio State is. In general, tradition, at least when I was going to high school, like the powerhouse teams weren't coming out of Columbus. They were more, either Cincinnati or Cleveland.
Yeah.
Well, he goes to Cincinnati. He takes this bigger gig, and then we get a guy who was I think he was an assistant at like a school called DeSales. DeSales was a big Catholic school. They did, they in Division III they were a powerhouse. So I think Coach White, he came over. And then what happened was he was kind of like, he was so welcoming to he had this thing. He was taking anybody that never, even if you never played, he was open to that, right? So I think that I went to his first meeting, and then I ran track the previous year as a sophomore. And so going into my junior year, I wanted to play. So I went to all his summer conditioning and whatnot. But I didn't have a car. My dad would drop me off. So I remember when my dad saw the pay-to-play fee, at the time he was still in grad school. My dad was in grad school for like a really long time, and he was just like, that's he was kind of like hesitant, and he was also worried about me just getting hurt. Which I guess when you look at me, I was tiny compared to these guys, right? I mean, I remember we used to have like the you go into the gym, and you'd have like all the bench, what your one rep max bench was. You have 225, 250, 275, 300. 300 would be like the biggest guy, the strongest guys on a team, right? And I couldn't even bench the barbell, right?
Right.
And sometimes I would wonder, I would see these guys at 200, 225, and I'd see them in person, and I'd be like, how was you getting 200? Like, they had a little bit more, they had more muscle than I did, obviously, but like, I still couldn't recognize, it didn't register.
Steroids a thing? Were steroids a thing in your high school? Because they were in mine.
It's possible it could have been. There was a school down the street called Upper Arlington High School. Upper Arlington was a powerhouse in football and lacrosse, and they had a kid named Jesse Claw, and he ended up getting an offer to play at Ohio State. He was a tailback, and there was an article about him over the summer. I remember reading this article, and it was talking about how he like worked so hard, and they said that he left school as a sophomore at 160 pounds. He comes back at 210 in the fall. He put on 50 pounds over the summer.
Yeah.
And I was like they made it seem like, oh, he just worked his ass off in the gym. And then but I was like, some of the guys I knew, they were like, man, he's juicing for sure. There's no way you're putting on 50 pounds like that in like 4 months.
You'd be surprised though. In high school, it's the one exception where
really
some guys. Okay. Well, so if you have really good bone structure, because that's kind of the limiting factor for, basically just making sure your joints can support that lifting. So, because a lot of people just, and we're going to kind of move into probably that conversation. A lot of people just aren't a good natural fit for the barbell exercises. Some people, right when they get under them, the way their body moves, the way their joints are, they just, in the barbell exercises you're able to load more weight. And if you're in that 16, 17, where your testosterone is just flying and you're eating like crazy. And especially if that's, obviously that can't be all lean muscle. But you'll see, 50 pounds is a lot, but you'll see like in high school, legit dramatic transformations that are a combination of muscle and fat. But it's just that moment where a young man going through, and that's why I tell my clients, I'd be like, hey, make sure your sons work out. My philosophy with kids was, let them learn the language of weightlifting, even as early as like 4th or 5th grade, 6th grade, not trying to make them lift heavy weights or anything, but just get the language down, learn how to move. And you're not even lifting weights necessarily, but learn how to move, learn how to squat, learn how to maybe do push-ups on a bar and how to position your joint, so that by the time you get in the weight room in high school, you already have that kind of, you have the articulations down, and now you're ready to hit the ground running. In that window, it's just like free money. I think that anyone listening to this, if you have kids, make sure they don't miss their teenage years with lifting at least a little bit, because that will stay on you. Even if they just lift through high school, maybe a little bit in college off and on, and then they forget about it for 15, 20 years after that, they'll still have an integrity to their body that you won't see the same. I'll have clients that come to me at like age 40 and have never really done anything physical. It's a different type of client versus somebody who played sports in high school and has that integrty, and
sure.
You might have seen that in your peers.
Yeah. I don't know if do you know Shibley from Houston?
I know him from Instagram, man. He's flamed me a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that
obviously he's a very intelligent guy, very well.
I was talking to him because he's jacked too, right? And he's like 48 or 49. I think he's like late 40s. And I asked him like when he started lifting, he's like when he was 14. Right, he was always so part of that is like, so sometimes you think about it, because I'm really, going back to high school, being like a son of like the eldest son of like South Asian immigrants. Like I was born in Bangladesh. Obviously for us, education is the thing that's stressed to us, right? I remember one of my buddies who's also Bangladeshi. He got into fitness in middle school because he wanted to play football and stuff, and then my dad, and I was going to try to go with him, and my dad was like, no, it's going to stunt your growth. And that was that whole myth, right? Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, when you look back, you think, well, if I just did body weight stuff back then, that would have been a good build up to high school. But like, to me, it was just like in high school, I thought it was cool to want to play football. I never played, like what happened was I got sick at the end of the summer. I was waiting for my dad one day, and it was like a chilly, like August night. And he was like 45 minutes late. So I'm like waiting outside in like shorts and a t-shirt. And I ended up getting like some kind of like walking pneumonia that put me out for like 2 weeks. And I was like done. And then I just didn't like I ended up not playing. But it was something that I always like wanted to do. And then I go to college, it's like trying to balance that. You go to the gym every now and then. Never had a program though. Really had no idea. This is, I guess, before the internet. I think back then people used to look at magazines and stuff. And then like when I started like high school, started working, I remember through this Discover You Life, I hired a coach through Muhammad Sharif's program.
Oh, wow.
And it was like 3 months or something. But it was not for fitness. It was for like all life stuff, whatever.
Right.
But like diet and fitness was part of it. And I remember I had but again, not knowing what you're doing. You go to the gym, no clue. And then the personal trainer, there's like trainers there trying, it was like Lifetime Fitness. He's trying to like recruit you to, sign up for something. And I was just like, nah, I don't know. I'm passing. And then I had an apartment in Chicago and I got married. We had a little gym down there. I would sometimes do that 15 minutes or something like rowing or some barbell work. I mean, dumbbell work. Didn't have a barbell, just dumbbells. For like 15, 20 minutes before work, 6 in the morning before going to work. But that wasn't consistent either, right? So right now it's like, I feel like I'm turning 40 later this year, and I feel this is the most consistent I've ever been. I did CrossFit. I was a part of a CrossFit gym for about 4 years, but the challenge I had was the class timings. It was like, I would try to go to a 6:30 class, but I used to drive I used to work like almost an hour away, and the CrossFit box is close to my house, so it's like you're trying to make it. But you know what I realized later is I dreaded going. I hated going. I enjoyed the feeling when I was done. And I knew if I was late, I had to do something like punishment burpees or something for every minute you're late. So, depending on who the coach was that day. So, I just didn't like it. I liked the feeling, but when I would do a CrossFit workout, I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything else for like 2-3 days.
Right.
So, I mean, again, and then I read about stuff like Firas Zahabi talks about, he's the MMA, the coach, GSP's coach. He's talking about how he doesn't like going to failure all the time. That's why he didn't like CrossFit, because he's like, he didn't like going to failure all the time because the recovery so much, you're not getting over time as much volume in, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's funny. CrossFit used to be my rival, but now in these times, we're kindred bros. We're like, hey, just I actually joined a CrossFit so I could use their open gym, and I'm like, man, this is a place where it's like some fellow patriots, some freedom, no masks, just basically just work out, and just the old world still exists. So
right.
But I think that a lot of people that join CrossFit, they're serving something besides fitness. So the thing is, me looking at fitness from a nerdy fitness professional perspective, I had all my critiques, right? But then I come to realize it's like, okay, well, they're serving a need beyond, because if you were trying to train your body, and no matter how big your goals are, right? It's not like the more hardcore, the better your results out of the gate. I mean, really, it's about understanding where, your system, what are your strong points, what are your weak points, and then layering up bit by bit that strength training, so that all of a sudden, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, you would have outperformed somebody who just started really fast but didn't really know what they were doing. They're just kind of like a shaken up Pepsi can, And I think that's a challenge with, now it depends. The CrossFit boxes, to use the lingo, it all depends on the coach. And I think now, because the market got so competitive, you're seeing a lot more quality coaching and smaller classes and stuff like that. But I think when CrossFit was at its peak in popularity, the problem was they're making lots of money, but they were just cycling people in, throwing kettlebells all over the place, barbells over their head. You're doing all these complex moves that would normally, normally you'd hire some overweight old Russian guy to kind of help coach you on these really technical lifts, and you would take time to learn them, right? And so, if somebody was just starting from scratch, or even if they had a baseline of fitness, but just going right into some of those Olympic lifts, there's a requisite mobility. And I think some good coaches will actually screen you and maybe forbid you from certain movements until you can meet that. But in general, there's a peer pressure. If you're in a class and the WOD of the day is, hey, do this exercise, then over to this exercise and that exercise. And let's say you fit 3 of the 4 pretty well, and you're doing fine with them, and that 4th one is kind of iffy. It's really hard for a coach to pull you out of that and be like, you know what, we're going to modify this, because you want to be part of the crew and part of the tribe. So I think that was one of the challenges that CrossFit faces. And it was the good and the bad. On the positive side, you have this tribe pushing you forward and making you work harder than you would on your own. But then you also kind of lose, you're not as cognizant of maybe where your joint position is, what, how that move is feeling. So you're proud of yourself for just beasting that workout. But then if you feel something doesn't feel quite right, maybe the shoulder's bothering you a little bit, you just kind of, if you don't have the experience, just be like, oh, that's just, weakness, leaving the body. And you'll just kind of ignore that and be back the next day and not understand that you're actually setting yourself up for long-term failure, regardless of your hardcore mindset.
Right. And for me, I always felt like the box I went to, like the coaches kind of were cognizant of that. I think we had an Olympic weightlifting course, and the lady who taught it, she was like, I think she placed 12th in the Masters, which is like the elder age. She's like 50. Oh, wow. And so she had an Olympic weightlifting background. And so, I mean, when I went to her classes, it was very much like, PVC pipe, form, Like if she saw you breaking form and try to add weight, she was like, no, take it down. That kind of. So I
Yeah.
didn't felt that, but I think I realized that for me over time, the reason I got into it was, my personality is kind of like I like doing stuff like you see things that looks interesting was hardcore.
Yeah.
I went to Hajj in 2015 with a guy named Junaid Dean. Junaid is actually I think he's one of the higher ups at Yaqeen Institute. But Junaid's like a really savvy businessman.
He's one
Um,
of the higher ups at where?
Yaqeen Institute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he like on the operations side. He's not like but he's like because he's a business guy by trade.
Right.
He runs he has his own business and he does work for Yaqeen.
Right.
So I met Junaid. Junaid was in my Hajj group, and I remember we were going for doing the Jamarat, and he was the flag bearer. And I remember it looked like he didn't break a sweat. And it was like 115 degrees, and he was just cruising. And I had learned that he was doing at the time doing CrossFit for about 3 years.
Right.
And I had come across this chick named Julie Fouché. She was a medical student and she had placed second. I think she tore her ACL on like a box jump or something the previous year. But I started following her story because I was like, this is interesting. It's like she's a medical student, which is super demanding, right? Because my wife's a physician, so I understand and then she's also competing in CrossFit and like placed I think second in the games, which is like crazy, right? So that's when I started, and I saw what Junaid was doing. So when I got back from Hajj, I was like, let me try this out. I think for me it was just like I don't think I really enjoyed the group. I like working out by myself, right?
Right. Yeah.
I like going to the gym when it's fairly empty. If I see
Me too.
people, I'll chat with them and stuff. But I kind of like do my own thing. This idea of like working out with a buddy just doesn't like I've done it before, and it's kind of like you're getting in my way almost. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So yeah, that's my take. I don't want to knock it. I definitely think it's something that it works for some people.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about, where it's like when you're working out, there's more needs that you're serving than trying to get physically fit, right? So I realized over time, especially as I got older, I like to work out. It's almost meditative, and a lot of bodybuilders are like this. I don't have the discipline of a bodybuilder, but I kind of relate to that style where almost the mindset of someone who practices yoga or what have you. So it's kind of like the other day I was just in the park doing pull-ups on the playground with whatever I could do and doing different body weight exercises, and I just enjoyed kind of the exploration. I did some push-ups in kind of a slower fashion, some fast. I was doing the pull-ups with kind of an L where my abs were engaged, and I was kind of adjusting my foot position where I could feel it more in my arms. And so I just really enjoy being like, hey, how does this feel? And then stretching in between. And it's just my time to myself. And it feels more like a meditative practice and just a self-care. Whereas other people couldn't relate to that, like a power lifter or a CrossFitter. They're like, dude, why are you even trying to work out if you're not just like killing yourself? Because they're testing themselves and they're getting almost a spiritual, I think they're a different kind of spiritual thing out of it, and so that's kind of something that's just fascinated me over the years, is just realizing like somebody will be working out. Like I had this one client and he would just go crazy, and I try to coach him on form, and then I just step back and I realize, wow, this guy is he's addressing some demons that I can't really get between. Best I can do is just try to like keep him from hurting himself, and I'm not going to change too much of what he's doing. He would always want to do his stuff real fast, and I would just look back and I'd be like, okay, what's the least amount of correction I can do to make him safe, and just subtly be like, look, we normally teach it with a more controlled form. You can do it explosive like that, but just watch out for, if you're feeling this, or keep your shoulder back so that basically the shoulder is one of the joints that is the most common to injure in the gym, right? And you want that to be part of a system. So especially if you're lifting, if you're doing curls or, a lot of exercises, you just don't want that thing popping out. You want to pull it back and have the back muscles, kind of secure that. So it's working as part of a system. And so, yeah, I just find that interesting. And you might notice that in yourself, that changes too, right? It might not be a fixed thing. At some point in life, a person might have a more meditative journey, and another point they'll be like, you know what, I need to test myself. I want to sign up for a powerlifting program. And it's not about health. It's about, I'm going to make my nose bleed when I pull that weight off the ground, right? I'm going to get under the bar and just test myself beyond what I could ever think possible. And hey, who's to judge that? But it's just people need to be clear that that's beyond the health pursuit. There might be some healthy things to challenging yourself in that way physically, and you get some nice healthy side benefits. But you ask any experienced powerlifter and how much their joints hurt, they're like, this is not for health. It's sport. You're basically just you're trying to be the baddest human being you can.
Right. And by the way, before I forget, you're talking about the whole dad thing, right? The whole dads, like trying to cater to dads and stuff.
Yeah.
There used to be a guy, and I forget his name. I think it was like Chris Lopez back in 2008.
I followed his stuff.
Fitandbusydad.com or something. It was all kettlebell stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, whatever happened to that dude? It like fell off I used to follow a lot of, like, there was Craig Ballantyne, Turbulence Training, and I remember as Chris Law, and I remember like, okay, because to me back then, you're like, the idea of like committing to, it was like, because I think even though back then, I think 2008 when I came across Chris's stuff, I was still single. So I was like, but to me, I was like, I still want to be efficient with my time, and looks like he positioned like, well, with kettlebells, you can do anything. And that's kind of how we was trying to like go with it, right? But I don't know. It's funny. It's like,
I just think so probably I'd love to talk to that guy and find out where he went, but I think it's hard to sell this kind of everyman's moderate fitness, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's a fantasy, and that's kind of what I learned in the business of fitness. There's a fantasy that you're, every person in their dark parts of their, or maybe it's not the dark parts, but in the parts of your psyche, there's just parts that are really exciting and just, wow, that awesome physique that people have. And really, that is where people get excited, and maybe they're feeling bad about themselves and they want to buy that physique, and versus like, hey, you know what, we could feel a little better with just a little bit of effort. Why don't we just get up and 5 minutes here, 15 minutes there, and all of a sudden you're feeling it, and then you're off in that. And that's a very mature approach that I totally support. But I think in the business of fitness and how you cash in, that's a very difficult sell. Like that level, if somebody's that mature where they already kind of I understand that, they might not be in a place where they need a lot of guidance, right? They're like, okay, I'll buy a $10 program to kind of help me just arrange things a little bit different. But they've already got their life together, I think, at that point. And they're so it's in terms of like what you would pay for, it'd be some super experienced, fitness guy with a great physique, or fitness gal, and they're in the gym, 10 hours a week, and they've got lots of experience of designing programs and so forth. And you're like, look, I'm trying to get the fastest results in the next 6 weeks. How would you arrange that program? I think that's kind of the conclusion I came to. We had a fat loss contest. Anytime you can sell short-term results, or great results in a short amount of time, that's where people will sign up. And more extreme the better, right? If you're like, hey, we got this 5 food program, you sign up and you only get these 5 foods for these 6 weeks, and you lose this much weight, and so that seemed to be one of the challenges in the fitness market. But we got around that by just building a community and having like a great gym and great equipment, and it was almost like an education center. People would learn about their own. I really took pride in helping people understand their own deficiencies and being like, hey, you naturally have, say, a strong squat, and your legs are naturally strong. Your posture is a little rounded, so just watch out for overhead stuff. I wouldn't prefer heavy overhead stuff for you until we, really work on a couple things. And I would prescribe maybe a few custom moves for them, right? Or maybe tight hips. And so that way every person knows their kind of little weaknesses or strong points. And then when we're doing the small group program, we can customize that, right? So we'd have a template that would fit everybody to a degree, but then we would tailor it a little bit, at the individual level.
One thing I have been in my head for like a year or two. I never like really. I'm not the right guy to push this, but I've always felt like there's a market for like the Daisy dad bod, right? The dad bod, the thing, right? You think about self,
like how to get the Daisy dad bod, like
no, how to get rid of it. I mean, it's easy to get it. You go to like, if you're in Chicago, you go to Devon Avenue and just eat Nahari and chai, but like how to get rid of it, right? Because I think about like myself in my my situation, like if I were to design, and I'm going to ask you this, like, what year maybe if you have some kind of ideal customer avatar, but like that people say, when you're doing sales, it's like, what is your customer look like, right? Really, and I look at myself, and I'm like 3 kids, married, but then what I
Yeah.
realize is that like South Asian women, like our wives, don't seem to care how we look. You know what I'm saying? The only reason I'm doing what I'm doing now is like honestly, a lot of it is just like vanity because I like clothing, I like fashion, and so to me, it's like I want to like look good, like you know what I'm saying? Um, and
Well, if you follow a lot of bodybuilding forums, that's a
yeah,
common complaint of the young bro who dedicates his life to fitness. He's like, it's not it's not a direct gateway to women in general. There's a few women that just automatically see like a crazy body and they're like, wow, but in general, women are more complicated from my understanding. So basically it's just but the fitness can be a gateway to confidence and kind of becoming a better man and becoming a more confident man. And so that can but it's just a funny thing where fitness ends up being something where bros are showing off to each other, and it's kind of like whereas the women aren't even, they're like, okay, that's cool, but they're, it's more of a sense of humor, confidence, overall masculinity. And so if working out adds to the masculinity, great. But that's my 2 cents. I'm not like some dating
yeah,
coach or whatever. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me that they're not that interested in it because I think it's just, they care about the whole thing. But working out is for us. And I would teach that to men and women where it's just like, look, this is not about for somebody else. It's going to be a path to your own empowerment. You're going to build confidence. You're going to do things that you didn't think you could. And that consistency, that keeping a promise to yourself and showing up, seeing the calluses on your hands, it's a nice reminder of like, you know what? I made a promise to myself. I can do something that's hard and it's a little bit boring, even when no one's watching. I get to show up day in and day out and do that. And that level of consistency, I think, is really lacking in the modern world. And so working out, I thought that was the best thing about it, is that it just can be a gateway for somebody building their confidence back and believing that, you know what, I can keep my word to myself. I can do things that are challenging and I can show up, most importantly, because that's the hardest thing in modern life is just, we can all do anything like here and there in spurts, but showing up and just, time and time again, whether it's cold, whether it's hot, whether it's beach season, whether it's, whatever, but just having a routine, being consistent, being that person who's reliable. And that was kind of one of my favorite side benefits of selling fitness.
Did you have ever like I don't know if you ever designed an ideal customer avatar for your gym, or did you kind of notice certain characteristics of people who would come to your gym?
It's funny, in the beginning, because of all that internet marketing stuff, I try to like slice up my avatar and I just come to the conclusion, I don't think it works like that. If you put yourself in like a Daisy mindset, you're like, you know what? I need to buy fitness from a Daisy selling about the Daisy dad bod. It's more of like, regardless of the race, like you would just, or even the culture, when it comes to fitness, you would just want the results from the guy or the gal that really could get the results, right? That had the testimonials to back it up, or had the good reviews, or the good body. And so I kind of came down to we tried different things, right? So we marketed, we were near San Jose State. Glutes were really in style, and San Jose has like a really diverse population. And so that curve, and the thing is, one of the reasons I like to sell glutes is because I wanted to sell weight training. And so you can't exactly sell like a railway thin just gaunt physique, right? So glutes and lifting just go together. So we kind of sold that for a while. I bought a machine, the Booty Builder, and that kind of, and also I think, communal fitness, it's naturally more of a female thing. So I just, ironically, even though I started out at dads, I kind of started to market toward women, and the guys would come anyways.
Do
So
guys care about glutes a lot? Are there guys that's because like is that something they care about?
You mean, do they care about it in their spouse, or do they care
No,
about it
if for themselves.
Yeah.
Like that's like I don't know, like it's something I don't really think about for myself. Like when you think about like
Right.
what your body parts you want to like part of your physique you care about, it's like shoulders, upper body, torso,
Exactly.
the V shape look,
No,
right?
exactly. So we would basically, when you're talking about online and our marketing, you have to have a focus. So we would sell the glutes, but knowing that the guys were going to come and inquire anyways, and they'd be like, "Hey, do you guys accept guys or whatever?" And then when we sell fitness to them, it's at a more personal approach, right? And I would explain that, look, one of the reasons we sell glutes is that it's kind of the engine, of the lower body. And we wouldn't just sell them like, if you're training your lower body, whether your goals are weight loss or just living a more active life. Like I had one guy, he got a great testimonial. He said, "Hey, I went skiing, and for the first time, I just lasted all weekend, even though my friends kind of tired out. My legs felt great. I just felt so strong out there, and I didn't have joint pain for the first time, after skiing." Um, and so when we talk to guys one on one, yeah, we wouldn't really hammer that, but we would say, hey, if your goal is weight loss, training the lower body is really important. So but we definitely did arms. I mean, you saw on Instagram, I had a lot of pictures. I had a Daisy guy in there with great arms that I would feature quite a bit. So at the end of the session, people would kind of specialize in body parts. So if it's somebody that wanted to work on glutes, maybe they'd burn out on the booty builder. And then, it's a bro who wants to get bigger arms, after the meat and potatoes, we wanted everybody to do the basic movements. But at the end, it's like, hey, you want to get more arms? Boom, go hit some barbell curls, dumbbell curls, whatever it might be.
Okay. Now how did you manage like clientele? So one thing I've realized is that like we were talking earlier about CrossFit, and then some guys are into powerlifting. Some guys are into the starting strength, and then everyone's got their own idea of diet, right? In the Bay, like I don't know, I don't know if you know Jaweed,
Yeah.
keto guy, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if he's still, but he was the the flag bearer of keto.
Yeah.
When I was in a keto WhatsApp group with him, because I was on keto maybe like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think he still swears by keto. So everyone's got this different philosophy. When they come to you, how do you manage that? Like, because we're all have different, like my wife, for example, when I told her I was gonna hire this personal trainer he's like this 22-year-old Palestinian kid, right? Who's just massive. I just, and I was just like, you know, and it's like we have weekly calls, and he gives me a program and with macros and calories, and like if I workouts, water, steps, all that stuff he asks me about. And she's like, that's not something I would be up for, because it feels like I'm in school again, where I've got a teacher like dictating to me what exactly I got to do. Like that's her mindset. How do you deal with people who have different but it's obviously worked for me. CrossFit may necessarily not have worked for me because for whatever reason. How do you figure that out? Because I think that seems to be really key, I think, in whether someone gets results or not.
Right. So early on, I felt an obligation to be this expert in nutrition. So I subscribed to this research review by this guy, Alan Aragon, and I just read as much as I could. But then I realized ultimately people are if they're buying a membership to our gym, they're either hiring me for my fitness expertise, or they just want a cool community to work out. A lot of people just looked at our gym and they walk in like, wow, this thing is just so cool. I mean, the vibe and the feel to it with the brick walls in downtown San Jose, not brick wall, like stone walls, and just like the nice rig with pull-ups, and we had all sorts of free weights, but we also had really carefully selected machines that I added over the years that were just an awesome addition. We just were very careful on which machines we selected. So ultimately, I realized over time, me writing articles that were detailed and refuting certain concepts and stuff, it wasn't actually helping to get buy-in or get people results. Maybe it helped get my name out there, good and bad. Maybe sometimes I was a bit came off immature or angry or what have you. So it could have hurt me in some ways, but I just ultimately realized, look, they're not hiring me for that. But I would offer a nutrition consult for new clients, because I'd always tell people look, if you're trying to get fast results, we do need to address nutrition, and I can work around whatever dietary, beliefs that you have. So I'd almost treat it like religion, where it's like, look, I'm not going to try to change your dietary beliefs. So if you're coming into me hardcore keto, I would just be like, okay, well, where's your parameters? And I would just be like, hey, as long as it's clear with your doctor, and you're willing to commit to this and that. And then I would kind of just gently nudge and say, hey, by the way, one of the challenges or one of the things I see in keto is that if it's not working out for you, or certain things are going awry, like you break out in your skin or something like that, your classic keto response is, well, I must have just had I need to go down to, I was having 15 grams of carbs. I need to go down to 10. And they'll blame themselves, right? Rather than blame the diet, they always just blame themselves. And so when you're pigeonholed like that, you really take tools off the table. So that was the only thing I'd try to encourage people. Like, hey, keto can be a lifesaver for people because it's so simple in the approach. And that's really what we need. We need simple solutions. But the downside is that if you just, if you take all the other um, frameworks off the table, or you fail to see the wider picture, which is really about macros, and these things can be adjusted, and you don't understand why keto works. That's why I would try to tell people like, hey, I just want to help you understand why keto works, and I totally support you doing it. But here's why it works, right? And then that way, maybe if they want to back off it and have a little bit, maybe still a high protein approach, but maybe mix in a couple higher carb days, and if they feel better on that, great. But that's how I would do it, and the same thing, if somebody loved Whole30, right? Whole30 is a very extreme program that people get fast results on, but I think the research shows that those sort of really restrictive diets, I'm not talking about keto, I'm talking about Whole30 in specific, where there's only like a few foods you can eat.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable, right? And that'd be fine if you would keep your results, but you don't even go back to square one. Most people that do that, they go back to worse than where they started. So it's kind of like, my thing is like, look, I plan to work with you. The people with Clackfit, I have people that work with me for like 10 years plus. So I'm like, look, I don't want to, I had this actually breakthrough moment in the kettlebell world where we were super hardcore, making people throw up. And they would see amazing results. We would just berate them and just be like, come on, and just we'll use whatever masculine metaphors we could to just shame them and just make them, work their butts off. And every time they're puking, we're like celebrating ourselves. We work out in the rain. And, we just thought we were so hardcore. But after, when it would get cold and we're working out outside, and our workouts would come down to like one or two people that would show up, just one guy from Toronto who was used to cold weather, right? This guy Khalid, shout out to him if he's watching, but he would just always show up and he'd be like, yeah, no big deal, right? But everybody else would quit. And then and I didn't know if it was because we were too hardcore or if because the weather, and probably both. But then I would see these guys later and they looked way worse than when I first found them. And I'm like, what am I doing? I mean, am I just selling some sort of military experience, or am I trying to help people actually get a hold of this like relationship with food? So sometimes crazy frantic exercise layered on top of a tough like relationship with food, it actually doesn't do anything to fix it, right? You short term might burn some calories and look a little better, but you are just covering up what ultimately we need to just change your relationship with food a little bit.
Right.
So yeah.
I did Whole30, I want to say about 2 years ago. I remember my 3-year-old, my middle daughter, she was only a few months old, and me and a coworker, so one of my friend's wives had mentioned like, oh, she's like, this seems to be like the best diet out there. She didn't do it herself, but she was like, because the concept of Whole Foods and all that, So yeah, you're going through, you're cleaning everything out. I dropped 14 pounds in a month, right? And I wasn't really exercising either. I was doing a little bit, and even a CrossFit gym, they encouraged Whole30. They did this Whole30 challenge at the beginning of every year.
Yeah.
But like I did mine in like November, I want to say, and it was just like, the thing is, it was trying to get to this finish line. And you're like, what can I really, like? You were just trying to survive. You're just like hanging on for dear life. Right. That's what it felt like. What I tell
people is, sorry, go ahead.
And then when I did keto, the thing about keto was, I would eat like it seemed fun. Like you go to like a sandwich shop, like, let me get a Philly cheesesteak with no bread and like just give me some extra ranch or something. Just dump some ranch on. So it's like super fat, or I remember my breakfast would be like a bulletproof coffee, 24 ounce with like like a freaking half stick of butter in there, blended in. And then like my lunch would be like beef bacon with like eggs and guacamole. Right.
Nice.
And so, but I remember I go for my annual physical around that time. I remember when I was doing keto, my doctor checks me out. He's like, well, first of all, at my CrossFit gym, I was telling my coaches, and they were like, they kind of like frowned a little bit. They were like, all right, well, okay. They weren't gonna tell me not to, but they're like, yeah, we just call it ketoacidosis. I didn't really know what that meant at the time. So I ended up going to my doctor for my regular checkup. He checks me. He's like, everything okay? I'm like, yeah, why? What's up? He's like, your resting heart rate is 115. And I'm like, oh, is that a problem? I don't know what that means. Like, that's a number to me. Like, what do you
Yeah.
tell me? And he's like, no, that's like not good. That's like really high. I might have to, I'm going to send you right now to get like an EKG done and stuff.
Stress test. Yeah.
Yeah. He started asking me all these questions. He's like, are you stressed? Like, no. And then we start talking and I told him I'm on keto. And then he's like, oh, we're talking about like what I'm eating and stuff. And then he's like, you're probably just dehydrated.
Yeah.
And I was like, that can do it? He's like, yeah. He's like, listen, I'm not saying he's telling me like, I'm not saying stop keto, but if you're gonna do it, you gotta make sure you're hydrated. And what's
Mm.
happening was I was sipping on this 24 ounce of coffee,
Mm.
and I would finish that around like 12 noon or 1 p.m. Mind you, during this time, I'm just drinking a diuretic. I'm not drinking any water, right? I'm just drinking this coffee, and then I'll go to so I might be drinking like maybe a bottle of water a day or something, or 2 bottles of water,
Yeah.
like 32 ounces, 40 ounces, right? And so I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I could do what he says and like stay on
I'm just
keto.
curious. I'm just curious if you remember whether or not your urine was dark, like, or was it clear?
Yeah, I would say it was dark. I mean,
Yeah.
in general,
Yeah.
only recently do I feel like it's not.
Okay.
Because this guy's got me on some impossible gallon and a half a day kind of regiment, which I have not been able to hit yet.
Yeah.
But I was just like, I could either try to drink more water, but I'm like, I know it wasn't my habit, even though I carried around water bottles and stuff. Like, I've had this thing for a few years, right?
Yeah.
40 ounces. But I was like, it's not my habit. Sometimes I'll forget, or I'll get busy with something, or I would have left it somewhere and I won't drink anything. I was like, and I'm like, and the thing is, I was like worried. I was like, yeah, and if this keeps up, I might just kill myself, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And then I figured it didn't feel like it was helping my CrossFit because I was like, I didn't like, and have
You
any
didn't feel anything.
carbohydrates. Yeah, I'd have the energy, right? Because they're saying, oh, you can get. Some people will be like, oh, if you're doing it right, the fat will fuel it, but I didn't feel that effect.
Right.
And a lot of times, most guys, I think Joey, and I have a friend named Amr, who's also from the Bay, who's in actually New York now. He lost like 150 or something in a year
Yeah.
doing keto.
Yeah. He did amazing.
You know Amr, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So like, but I was like, most guys I know who are on keto don't do that, aren't on that. They're yo-yoing, and then you're right, they just fall off, and like sometimes they seem to be worse off. They try it out because they see it makes sometimes it's like, oh, it makes sense. It's simple. Let me try it out. But then when you're like Muslim, or you go to these like dawats or something, I remember I go to like you go to like some Bengali guy's house and you're not eating rice. They're like, what? And you eat, and it doesn't take that much to like kick you out of ketosis, and then you're screwed, and you got to catch up, right?
So so when you're talking about sustainability, that's what I'd ask people to think about. I'd be like, look, think about the cultural things that are really meaningful to you, and don't just have this naive idea that you're just gonna skip all that. Like when your parents invite you over, or and you're just gonna totally shun those dishes and have your own foods. That can work for a month, 2 months, what have you, right? I mean, family can tolerate you doing anything for like a short-term period, but you want to think like, what is this going to be like 5-10 years? So for example, in American, you got Thanksgiving, you have holidays, and you're expected to have that. So you need to kind of, I think you need to adjust that into your plan. And what I would tell people, what I came to the conclusion is, people do need extreme solutions. So I used to try to resist that and be like, you know what, don't do anything extreme, just be reasonable and blah blah blah. But I realized we do need extreme things. It's a way to feel inspired. But the trick is, realize when you start it that this is temporary. Number one. Number two, make sure you take something with you. So if you did Whole30 and all you got out of it was hating it, then, and I'm not talking about you, I'm just saying that person, then that was just a complete waste of time. During that time, you should have figured out some healthy recipes that you somewhat enjoyed that you could now keep with you. If you could even maybe, and I would tell people, hey, even though Whole30 doesn't have you count calories, I would practice, just noting the macros, right? So as you go on different diets and you go through different fitness phases, being able to know that like, oh, an egg is 6 grams of protein. That's something you can take with you. Let's say you were on a diet that for whatever reason had a lot of eggs in it, right? Say you're on keto and you just were having eggs like almost every day, omelets and stuff. Um, and realizing, oh, okay, an egg is, I think it's 100 and no, it's 76 calories, and it's got 6 grams of protein. 4 of those grams happen to be in the egg white, and one. So right there, you're like, okay, egg whites. That's a way to get a lot of protein at a lower amount of calories, right? Because most of the calories are going to be in that yolk, and then that's not to say don't eat yolks, but just understanding, taking those things with it, maybe learning an egg dish or two that you really enjoy, and so that way in each of these phases, you're taking something with you that you can now, like in your case, you've been through these different diets, and now you're with a trainer where you're doing a program which seems to fit you. You can kind of now blend some of those things together and live a healthy lifestyle that really fits maybe your flavors, your tastes, has some deprivation. I mean, deprivation is part of it, right? So it's like you're going to have parts that you're feeling deprived. But it's just making sure that it's in the right doses to where you're not breaking, that you don't just totally hate life. And then you have a way to kind of phase out of it, So I think these seasons of like cutting and bulking makes sense as long as you don't take it to an extreme, but it seems to fit the natural human patterns. In the winter, we might want to carry a little more weight. Come spring, you're feeling more energetic. The days are longer. You're going to be around, swimming and at beach. You might be inspired to lose a little more body fat, be a little more active in general. So I think that those natural seasons make sense. Where you're like, yeah, I'll be a little fluffier. I mean, for me right now, I'm just living regular working stiff life, so I'm fluffy year round. But like basically was at the time, you just get a little fluffier during the winter, and then you start to get a little more hardcore and pick your favorite extreme diet, right around this time, right around March, and just try to go hard for a couple months, and then maybe just phase out of that during the summer a little bit.
Right. And I think that's the thing. That's the key right there for me has been I'm looking at what I'm doing right now, and I'm like, I think it's sustainable long term. I think it's
Yeah.
now granted it is a commit in the sense that like, I have to have a food scale. I gotta measure my food out. I've gotta like meal prep. I gotta log it into my fitness pal. I've gotta like be at the gym 4 times a week, which is like an hour, 15 minutes, right?
But see, those are skills. Those are
yeah,
skills. You'll be able to eyeball it, right? So even though you're
right.
weighing everything, you can easily get, if you do that for like a year,
Yeah.
or maybe even less, you'll get to a point where later in life, like, what, I don't feel like breaking out the food scale, but I can eyeball this meal and I know what the grams are. I know what roughly that weighs within a margin of error that's practical enough that, allows me to get by.
Right. And I think what happens is too is like something, and my wife, she's like, okay, her philosophy is when anything I do a diet or exercise, she's like, as long as it doesn't affect me, as long as you don't restrict me for anything, I don't care what you do. So guess what?
That's key, man.
She's
The
bringing
spouse
in,
is key.
yeah. Now she doesn't, but the thing is, she brings in like pizza, fried chicken, etc. And sometimes I'll be like, depends on when, like I might hit a leg day, like happened to me yesterday. I hit leg day in the morning. And then, when you do leg day, you're still like famished. You can eat and you're like, I'm still starving. And then she went and bought it for lunch like a big bucket of fried chicken. And I like put down like 2 thighs. And I logged it and it screwed up my fat macros and my calories for the day. I had to manage what I ate the rest of the day, but it was kind of like, but I was like, all right, you take an L, but in a grand scheme of things, it's like, but hopefully once I'm off my program, 90 days, the plan is for me, like, then I'll hit Ramadan. The plan is for me to like maybe do like figure something out. Cause now I probably will never go like not stop. I weigh myself every morning. So what's I've noticed about that, it's like some people say that's over analyzing, but for me, I'm like, I can kind of tell. It allows me to check what things are working. So sometimes I know I had a takeout meal one day and I log it. Maybe I didn't account for certain things, and I'm like the scale didn't move much or went up, right? So because I still want to like, there's still foods I miss, but I'm like, if I could have that like once a month or something, it's not a big deal, right? Because there's certain things I had not been able to touch, like burgers, fries. There's like dessert crepes, things like that. Like I've made modifications for things, like I like this Crunchwrap Supreme I was eating at the beginning of the show. Things so these are things I enjoy actually eating. They
nice.
And they're healthy and they fit the macros and all that stuff. But yeah,
nice.
As we have about 20 minutes left here, I want to make sure you get out for Usher, but I kind of want to change the tune a little bit. One of the things we were talking offline was, before, like, you've been Muslim roughly like 25 years or so. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Back in the day, I remember like the stuff that Muslims would debate would be, I say the moon sighting and the music and Zabiha meat versus non Zabiha meat. But now there seems to be this entire like how we approach things politically um seems to be a thing of like where the rights of brotherhood seem to be like open for yeah, it seems to be fair game, right? And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, so, like, we were talking offline. I recently released an episode of Richard Spencer, the founder of the alt right, and I tweeted about it a couple of weeks ago. And the kind of pushback you get for doing a show like that, like you're being called a Nazi, or there was a tweet out there by someone who's actually supposedly a student of knowledge saying that like I aspire to be a global fascist. That's literally what the tweet said. Um, and I'm kind of like, listen, my
Interesting.
take is that like it may have been a mistake to do an interview with Richard Spencer. I'm not saying it's like I'm right, but I'm saying that like I try to understand other people's takes, but for some people it's like no. And you see it now with how people react to COVID-19, amongst other things, the election, Biden versus Trump, even and now it's like Biden's bombing Syria, but no one seems to like really say much about it. There's something about like the deportations and stuff are still going on, and the kids in the cages are still there, like all the or it's actually gone up or something. You hear
Yeah.
these things, um, and my take is like, um, it's quite disheartening, honestly, that Muslims are consumed by things. Not they don't seem to prioritize what they should be angry about and are hung up on these little on other things. And if you try to like even have a conversation with a guy like a Richard Spencer, someone that you might disagree with, you get all this stuff that I don't even remember it. Like this whole idea of you're giving somebody a platform. That idea to me is like doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I just want to kind of get your take on what you've seen in the recent years compared to like how it was when maybe the good old days.
Yeah, I think that this is, I don't know if it's really Muslims alone. I think that there is a fitna that's fallen upon the wider culture in America. So I think that we sense that times are tenser, right? So I grew up here. I actually born in California. My parents born in California. My grandparents, right? So my grandfather on one side was a captain of Stanford soccer team. Grandparents on the other side went to Cal Berkeley. And then my parents went to Cal Berkeley. I'm the first guy that didn't go to UC, went to San Jose State. But so it's kind of personal for me. Just a lot of people are just like, oh, I'll move somewhere else or what have you. But to me, California is in a different. It's not as carefree, right? I never cared about politics, but I think now it's hitting home. Like there's that slogan, "Silence is violence." Like nobody's allowed. Like before, just be like, oh, whatever. Let the politics, let the sultans do their thing. I'm gonna deal with sneakers. I just want to
Yeah,
be on the popular culture. And then the thing is, as a coach, I would always just want to understand people at a basic level. I didn't care what their political thing was. I just wanted to kind of like get to know people. But now I feel like it's different. It's like we sense that there's this culture war happening, and there's real consequences to it. So I almost feel like that quote that was mentioned in the podcast that you did with what was the gentleman's name? The business
the
guy,
Marine Matt
the Marine.
Sapala. Yeah,
What's his name?
Matt Sapala.
Matt Sapala.
Yeah,
Man, that guy is really thoughtful. But I loved his quote that he mentioned from Plato, which is something like the punishment for abstaining from politics or ignoring politics is that you'll be ruled by your inferiors, and that's kind of just what I felt like. I don't know, inferiors is a strong word, but people that might not grasp certain things, right? They might not grasp certain economic realities. I feel like because America's been so financially stable for so long, people who might not, and I feel like our high school system's terrible. We're not giving people a real view of history. We're not giving them a real view of economic reality. So we don't realize how um, this stuff can all go away, right? We just take for granted that this financial stability can stay here and everything's going to be fine. And, we just enact this policy and that policy and take from here and do that. But at a certain point, systems just like a healthy body, right? It can take a lot of stress. It can take a lot of nonsense. You can eat a lot of pizza, a lot of junk food. You can do a lot of stuff to a healthy body, but then seemingly overnight, even though it might have been a 20-year process, overnight, all of a sudden, all these things pop up and like, oh, what did I do? And it's like, well, it's the last 20 years of just not really taking care of yourself, right? So that's the sense that I feel now that that's where we're at, seeing where California has gone over the last, in my lifetime. I just feel that without being hyperbolic, I feel the edge of dystopia nearby. You go visit San Francisco, you take relatives to San Francisco. Like if you were to visit me, you'd probably be like, hey, let's go Pier 39. I'd take you out there. It's different, right? You just see tents in the financial areas. You drive in the so-called nice parts of San Francisco, you're probably going to see someone peeing on the wall. And we're seeing that in San Jose. Oakland is terrible. My son was hospitalized. He was paralyzed, and we actually spent a month in Oakland. Actually 2 weeks in Oakland, Kaiser, and then out in Vallejo. But being in Oakland, there's always been rough areas, but Oakland is terrible now. You see people moving out of LA. People talk about LA just being awful. And what people don't understand is that these are policies that we've enacted, that we voted for, and politicians pandering to us, and we're seeing the effects. So yeah, it's divisive times. So it's like I feel like things are split. We can love each other and appreciate each other as humans, but there's different sides of the culture war, and I almost feel like you got to pick a side and basically just that's where I came. I mean, as I saw what happened to my business, what I see what's happening in California, I just felt I couldn't be happy any longer just being silent. So I'm like, you know what? Let me just voice what I see. So at least I'm a happy man. I go to, people might think I'm angry. I do have some angry, sledge. I use rhetoric and I come off strong in certain things, but I actually sleep really good at night. And I'm just a really joyful person. But I think it's because I've just let go of this idea that I need to be accepted by everybody, and that I need to not talk politics. And I'm like, what, as long as I feel like I'm able to say what I'm witnessing and be honest about it, and just let the cards fall where they may, then I just leave the rest to Allah. And it's like, hey, if that's the will, that this kind of fitna is descending, and these policies are becoming popular, and people are moving more towards socialism, and it is what it is. As long as I'm doing my part and trying to speak against it and educate, my son is really, I think, doing a great job reading what he can and learning, educating himself, educating his friends. So that's kind of just as the liberals over the last 20, 30 years, and I've always been kind of on the liberal side, they focused on the youth and they focus on popular culture. I think that's really what I'm going to do, is just kind of, my son's friends, and, whatever I can do to just have conversations with them and pull out some common sense wherever possible.
There was I was having lunch with a former boss of mine, and he voted for Trump in 2016, and then he voted for him again in this past election.
Yeah.
And my former boss is actually he's South Asian. He's half Bangladeshi, half Pakistani, and he was telling me that one of the things that he really supported Trump was his position on immigration. And I was kind of like, well, we're immigrants. Like, because generally the idea is like, okay, we should want more open. The idea of open borders to me is like, well, why is that a problem? Because that kind of philosophy allowed people like us to even be here, right?
Right.
And he was like, I have a friend in California in LA, and he's like, there, it's actually really bad. Like, it's literally like people are not safe. And I'm like, he's like, dude, it's hard to describe. You have to go there. If you go to LA and you see what's going down, you'll get it, right? So is that like, because when you talk to people, I bet when you talk to people about like having like these tent cities and things like that, or sanctuary cities, people are gonna be like, you're intolerant, you don't want immigrants, etc. But like it almost felt like what my boss was telling me, what Trump's statement about like they bring the worst here, the rapists and the drug dealers and stuff. He's like, that's actually manifesting. Has that been your personal viewpoint? Is that what you're seeing in California?
No, I look at it like topsy. I feel like it's upside down world, like topsy turvy. So everything is backwards. So like we claim, I think one of the most shameful things in America is the inner city environments, like in Chicago, LA, Oakland, The fact that a young black man, the biggest risk of death is homicide, um, versus other demographics don't have those same risks. I feel like the left claims to champion for the underdog, and all the policies. This is just what I've come to realize. It's actually the exact opposite. So if you want to raise those neighborhoods up, you have to have some sort of immigration process, right? So that's how I look at immigration. It's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe it increases a little bit. I mean, you risk a little bit of safety. But I'm not so worried about that. I just look at it as logically like a body needs skin. It's porous. You can have stuff get through, but there needs to be a process for what gets through, what doesn't, who's coming in. But really, it just seems like an open play by the left to just get more votes, right? The more we open our borders, and they're kind of like, hey, just remember who let you in here, right? And it's just that's what it feels like. It's just a big power scam. And the people who get hurt the most are not the elites, right? Gavin Newsom's going to be fine. A lot of the people, you and I'm not saying we're elites, but I mean, with our connections and stuff, we'll probably be okay, regardless of how it goes. It's what I care about is that immigrant family in San Jose that is here legally trying to build a business. And all of a sudden you're just flooded with all sorts of different, burdens financially, regulations. It's so hard to run a business. I mean, in America, small business has always just been a huge part of what we do. And it's so beautiful that any family of any background can just open up a business. But in California, that's a much harder process, right? All the regulations, all the risks that are running up against the labor board. And so to me, borders is just part of the issue. When you're talking about the tents, I think that's a direct relation to the nihilism or the lack of meaning that the youth feel. So basically right now, when you go to school, my son went to a high school, 3,300 kids out in San Jose. There's just a real sense of gloom. The teachers don't have any really control over the classroom. You can tell most of them don't like going to work. My daughter's class over at a different school, a lot of the kids are cutting themselves, taking pills. There's just kind of this hopelessness. And so we project that out. Of course, they're going to be homeless. I mean, what are they aiming for, right? So, I mean, you're going to see homeless go more and more. And it's not like, oh, let's have mental health awareness. It's like, no, you guys are creating the problem with this nihilism and basically not teaching the importance of God and family. And, when I say that, I know what it sounds like. Oh, this guy's a religious extremist. But at a real practical level, I mean, I work with kids and I see them grow up. You need purpose. You need family. You need, we're trying to topple the family and say that terms like mother and father are somehow aggressive terms or microaggressions or things like that. And so we're super confused in California. And I think that's what's really leading to the homelessness. So people are just confused. They have pain. They need answers. They're turning, in drugs. There's no, there's no real consequences. I got a buddy who happens to be, first generation immigrant, Daisy guy. His relative owns a hotel in San Francisco. And during COVID, is a Radisson, I believe, San Francisco paid him to turn it into a homeless thing because basically since they weren't having customers, they said, hey, we'll pay you to just turn us into a homeless thing. And twice a day, they run drug carts up and down the halls to make sure everybody gets, clean needles and does the drugs that they want. So there's no real, in California, we try to take away all the consequences for messing up, and I'm all for empathy. And I think we should have pathways for people to lift themselves up, but it's just gotten to a point where it's just ridiculous. Ultimately, if you're not allowing families to have safe places where they can raise their families, if you're not allowing clean streets without urine and people like taking a dump, you can't have small business, right? Think about those immigrant. I mean, I feel like I'm fighting for the little guy. Think about the shop owner, right? Middle Eastern or Asian or wherever. He's got a shop in downtown San Francisco, and he used to get business from the tourists who would come by, right? And they might buy a thing of water, pay $2 for a thing of water, or pay this for that. Well, because of our policies, people no longer want to go down those streets, right? And you're not even allowed to shoo a homeless person out, because you get in trouble for what have you. You get a bad PR thing, and so you're basically what ends up happening is the companies like the big names out there, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Amazons, they are the ones who basically win out of all this because the small business can't survive. So everybody has to work for them. They're able to get labor cheaper. The minimum wage helps those guys. And yeah, I know I went off on a lot there, but I just look at everything we're doing is promoting the opposite of what we want. We're slowly creating a world where the elites have more and more power, whether it's the tech elites or the big names out there. And we're not allowing a situation where that little guy that America's always been about can rise up, and basically, work for maybe his dad's small business and, work hard and then learn a little bit of skills and go do something else and just slowly lift himself up or herself up. We're eliminating that little by little.
Yeah.
And it's sad to see.
And it seems like a lot of times what I'm hearing you saying is that like there are these real issues, and then there's all this other like small crap that gets put in. Like my wife was telling me the other day, and we kind of wrap up with here because I know you got to run. But my wife is she's in the medical field, and she's an OBGYN, and she's telling me that like there's talk now about them pushing legislation to like make it say that like talking about a baby's gender, that an ultrasound is transphobic.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you cannot say it's a boy or a girl because it's transphobic. And I'm like, what would you say? Would you say, and then we were having a discussion with this with some friends at dinner, is like, would it be a male? It's like, oh, you'd say the male member or the female member. I'm like, no, that's still transphobic because that's male or female. You would call it a penis or vagina, right?
Yeah.
And you see it now in people's language and how they censor. They refer to their husband or wife as the spouse to keep it gender neutral.
Yeah.
And it's like, and this is the thing.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend the other day, and she called her person a partner, and I didn't know if she flipped or I didn't know if she still, it's just funny. It was an old client. She's like, yeah, my partner wants this, and I didn't want to, I respect her and like her regardless, but it just, you're right. The language has changed. So I just was like, oh, wait a second. Is she going the other way, or is she like, but it's just, that's the new terms.
Yeah. But I think people see that now, and there are like a lot of people who are like, wait, what the hell is that? And then they wonder why people like Jordan Peterson got a following, because initially it was about the pronouns thing in Canada, right?
Yeah.
And people were like, well, no, this is. I'm like, well, the average person you talk to them, they'll be like what? Like it won't register, and then you've got that going on in their head, and that may affect their voting decisions because they don't understand like the technicalities on certain policies. So it just creates this big mess. Right, COVID-19 relief bills have other junk in there not related to COVID. Agenda to gender education in Pakistan, for example. I don't know what's, but there's something like that in there, right? So it's just there's all this stuff going on. And long story short, I want to ask you, like, I know you talk about your history in California. People Joe Rogan left, but he's not a Cali native. He's from Boston. The guy you mentioned, Matt Sapala, who I interviewed. He works with a guy named Patrick Bet David. I don't know if you've ever heard of Patrick Bet David.
No, I watched his interviews. Yeah.
So they work in the same organization. Like Patrick is basically like Matt's superior in a way, right? I think Matt's second in command in his organization, and he grew up in Glendale in SoCal, and now he's in tech. Now I think he's in Florida now. So there's this exodus. Do you think about, and me and my wife, we talk about about just leaving America, like going to Turkey or someplace, or Malaysia, or just traveling the Muslim world at some point, just to like, first of all, for our kids to get some kind of different culture, but also you see what's going on, you're like, man, this is just weird. Right?
Yeah. For me, it's like I have my parents nearby, and it's been such an amazing blessing to have my parents be so close to my kids. And so I feel and I just feel roots in California. So I don't feel like I'm gonna leave anytime soon. If Texas does secede, I'd be very tempted. I'd move over there. But in Florida, I love the governor over there. But when you talk about transgender, I think in kind of that issue that you mentioned about in the womb. So there's two major issues there. One, confusion, right, which leads to a lot of I think just psychological challenges, right? So there's that issue where, people are trying to be tolerant, but you're not looking at what does that do to kids growing up where they can't even say what's in front of them. You see a man, but you're not allowed to use that language. Girl sports are kind of like changing. So you're just, that level of confusion, I think, leads to depression and a lot of, potential mental challenges. And then on the other side, there's an economic reality, right? So like Biden, I think signed an executive order to wear transgender surgeries in military, right? And so one side might look at that and be like, man, that's very empathetic. Way to go, USA, lead the way in this type of things. But it's also just a very privileged way to look at money and resources, right? I mean, there's so many people in America that still are suffering from real challenges, right? Just basic security and basic food and hunger. And the idea that we could just spend this amazing amount of money, right? We just have this, that's a real challenge with the left, where there's like this unlimited checkbook where you just write checks for things that sound good and sound, empathetic, but we're not looking at the real world consequences of that. And so that's, yeah, that concerns me. And I think that that's kind of why I threw my hat in the ring and started speaking up on some of these issues, even though most of my friends are really left. Some of them still might consider themselves my friends. Others, I think, are done with me. So, but I can still consider them my friends. But yeah, man, it's been a wild, last year.
Yeah, and those surgeries ain't cheap. I've actually I've interviewed a trans person on my podcast, and I think it's like 20, 30 grand, right? So you're talking about like having that opportunity for people to do it. Although many of them would say, trans people I've spoken to say that some of them aren't comfortable with the surgery still. They're still not. That's because it's almost like there's an inherent fitra belief that like because once you do that, you chop it off or you get something else. It's there's no going back,
Yeah.
right? Or if there is going back, it would be extremely difficult, right? So
I think that this spiritual concept of boundaries, right? So like it's really healthy for a human to have like these walls, because there's going to be pain and questions and confusion regardless. So this idea that you can just be what you want, it doesn't, there's no proof that this actually makes people feel better and live happier, more fulfilling lives. There's a client I knew, her husband was bipolar, and basically went off his meds, and then decided that he was born the wrong way, right? Late in life. And what it did is it allowed him to get a lot of attention, right? When you do that, all of a sudden you get a whole new group of people that are saying, "Oh my God, you're so courageous." And his company actually paid for the surgery, right? As one of these California companies that, basically included that in their perks and their health benefits. And I just thought, wow, there was no real criteria. Like there was no evaluation to say, hey, well, let's get you back on your meds first before you make this decision. And on the other side, I know I had another client. That's a great thing about fitness, is you get to learn people's really just individual stories. And I never would share these names, but another one, her sister had decided, and her sister just lived a pattern of like kind of being pretty selfish, and basically was always just taking money from the parents and never being grateful, and they were just kind of outsiders in the family, and didn't have many friends. They just kind of were living, I'd say, a very I don't know, non-spiritually awake life, right? Really kind of lazy and just living off others and being ungrateful and being that kind of demeanor. And they decided that their kid was a trans at like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old. And so they put a GoFundMe out there, right? To like, raise money to get the different clothes and all that. So the problem with opening up these boundaries is that humans are complicated. You have all these different psychological needs. There's no way to sort out what's an actually authentic, or genuine conversion versus like how about just scratching the need of significance? Like I need to be like in my daughter's class, the teacher during the sex ed week, they would ask like, hey, you know what? We now know that there's all these different options out there, bi, tri, poly, whatever it is. I don't know all the terms, and I don't want to know all the terms, but she would introduce all that stuff. And she would say, hey, based on this, guys, and these are like 7th graders, who here thinks that there's something other than, I think it's cisgen, right? Is our hetero, whatever, who thinks they're other than that? And like 60% of the class would raise their hand and be like, yeah, I think I'm this and that. And so it opens up this, and these kids just want to get attention from the teacher, right? And so, my daughter was sitting there just kind of like, not getting any feedback, not being part of the conversation, because she's like, didn't feel she could contribute. She just, you know what I mean? So, we're kind of changing that conversation. We're introducing kids' books to be different. We're kind of like bringing in these kind of like alternative lifestyle people that we no longer want to be alternative, bringing them into the classes early on and telling kids, hey, this is this and that. And so, yeah, I feel like we're trying to reshape what society's been and what's worked. And that's, I guess, the progressive
Yeah.
way. And it scares me.
And to wrap up here, I think sometimes even you and I having this conversation, who knows that in like 10, 15 years, just this dialogue could be constituted as hate speech. And they could get up and be like, Mahin and Yusuf are bigots and they need to get doxxed or canceled or whatever, and it really, we're just like trying to and these are obviously legitimate concerns, and obviously the trans people I've met, I mean, they're real human beings, and you have empathy for them, and sometimes it's and I realize that's a spectrum too. Sometimes it's like not. Sometimes you find people who are just like, okay, they might be confused, and some people are like, okay, I really am born with something, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what that's kind of, I want to leave it at that. Yusuf, where can people like find out more about what you're doing? I know you don't have the gym anymore. Do you still do any online coaching or anything like that along those lines?
Yeah, I just live a private life right now.
Yeah.
So I just doing a family thing, working, and it's been great. If somebody wanted to reach out to me and just kind of connect and say what's up, they could Instagram private message me. Um, and that's probably, yeah, that's probably the best way.
And your handle is Clackfit.
Clackfit.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, then it is it in your jacket as well. So, for our special guest, Yusuf Clack, I'm your host, Mahin the podcaster. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at info@sultansandsneakers.com. Follow the channel on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where I'll engage with you any of those platforms if you don't want to send me an email. And Yusuf, again, appreciate you coming on. Real fun show for me, just to pick your brain about fitness and nutrition, and then kind of segueing into this whole, like, I had to ask you what's going on in California with what's going on, but I'm gonna let you run, so you can take care of your afternoon prayer. So I certainly want to be the cause for you being delayed there.
No, you wouldn't, man. Great to meet you, Mahin. I really appreciate it.
All right, sounds good, man. Take care.
All right, so.
Looks up.